what do you need to present? Like USB-C to HDMI. There we go. Let me just move all of my crap. David, take one of them and move my phone. Take my cables. They can just stay there. Yeah. Maybe David can tell a joke while, like, we all love David's jokes.
I was meant to be the continuity man while one lightning talk changes to another, and it was on the basis of a few stories I was telling in the bar only a night or two ago, again, about my nan. My nan, my grandmother. And just to tell you a little bit about my nan, she's a very lovely lady, no longer with us, but I remember the time when I went to visit her in the old people's home, and I said, hello, Nan, it's David. She went, I don't know anybody called David. I said, you know me, I'm Carolyn Paulson, lived next door to you for 23 years. She said, I don't know anybody called David. I said, I'm David. I used to come and stay with you at weekends and all that sort of thing. She said, I don't know anybody called David. I said, you remember? And then a nurse came along. She said, it's not that one, it's that one over there. I said, well, can't you put them in different coloured nighties or something? They're all there with their little moustaches and everything. Anyway, that's enough about my nan for now. Our first lightning speaker is Perry from Tellu. Hey!
Okay.
Start. Go.
So I'm here in defense of friction because we're all about real time, frictionless, everything. So in the past, sorry, I shouldn't move too much. So if we kill a mammoth in the past, there's no way to move it because it's too heavy and friction was there. So what we invented the wheel, right? So the wheel is now being able to move things much heavier than mammoths and everything. But did you know that the wheel actually depends on friction as well, right? So friction is still good. But now when we move so fast that we can share everything in an instant, what we do, we have shock and share. The research has shown that the more shocking things you see on your timeline, the more likely you are to share it. And how to shock? How to shock is usually by saying something that's outrageous, that's fake, that's intentionally. There are now loads and loads of people whose media image, celebrity following, and all that sort of stuff is made up entirely of trying to shock. This is not new. In the past, there's in America, even now, growing up in the 80s, I remember what they call a shock jock. I don't know, it's an American term, like Howard Stern, I think, radio shock jock. But that's just radio and so forth. But now shock jocks is in your timeline. So when we try to remove friction, sometimes bad things happen. So next, boom. Right. So in America, again, because this is recently come up a talk, there's a neighborhood software social network thing called Nextdoor. So what they do was one of the feature of Nextdoor was you can see there and then look, there's someone spooky walking around. They have a spook alert. So they press spook alert and then you can report, oh look, someone creepy crawling around looking at cars or whatever. And then they found out that most of the spook alert is because it's racially biased. So what do they do? And then one of the ways they're doing, I don't know whether they claim they're successful, but there's some criticism they're not. But at least I think I heard some of the one founder or the technical director or something, they were interviewed and then so we have to invent a friction. So people, when they press spook alert and they reported something that includes, for example, the skin color, it's important when you see a suspect because police will want to know. They have code names here in police dramas here, and they have IC1 male, IC2 or IC4, maybe, like Caucasian and so forth. So they put the friction in to see when you report something and you put something that requires racial, and then they put something. So what else is it doing? So once you put there, and then it's like to shock you into, like this morning, to recognizing your bias. Are you really reporting something spooky, spook alert or creepy or something, or is it just because you're seeing a certain skin color, for example, in this way? So yeah, that's it. I'm under time. I just want to say, in all the frictionless, real time, reducing latency to 0, we still need to think about introducing some friction sometimes. So to stop us from doing instinctive thing, which can be bad. That's it.
Thank you, Perry. Perry brings it in just 6 minutes. And our next speaker is Jonas. Actually, not all the jokes that I'm going to tell today are about my nan. Not all of them. In fact, I was thinking to tell you a joke about SDP, but I wasn't sure you'd get it.
Should I very quickly say the very quick running order?
I beg your pardon.
Tori is next after, and then David.
Tori,
David. Randy, Tim.
Okay, thank you very much. And Jonas, are you ready?
Yes, I'm ready.
It's over to you, sir.
Right. I'm Jonas, and I'm here to talk about how to do zero downtime deployment with Dragtio, a product made by Dave Horton down there. Very cool. Dragtio is, much like Camalio, a zip proxy server, for those who don't know, but it's a bit different. It's been split in two. There is basically a C application that wraps zip Sophia that sits in one place, and then there's a TCP connection to a Node.js application. I apologize about this. That handles all the business logic or routing logic, enabling us to write that in JavaScript. Something like this, where that is annoying. There's nothing I can do about this. Wow, what is the problem here? I don't know.
Is it Linux?
It's not Linux, unfortunately. Now it's not doing anything. All right. So yeah, it might be bizarre to have the application split in two by a PCTCP layer, but it allows us to do, all right, seriously, forget this, I'll just explain it in picturesque terms. What it enables us to do, to have this separation between Dragtio and the node application by TCP, is that we can slam a load balancer in between these two things. It could be one of the ones Amazon offers, it could be AJ proxy, whatever. So we can split it and load it between 3 instances, which then allows us to, let's say we have 3 instances of one instance, we slam another 3 into the cluster of another version. When they eventually drain out, then we can swip the traffic over to the new versions, leaving us with 0 downtime because we never restart the actual zip instance. We never restart anything that has a connection to it. Things just swap to the next version seamlessly. And if we are using something like WebRTC with secure sockets, we can slam another load balancer in front of 2 Dragtio servers and have even more high availability in our infrastructure, which is also extremely nice. And of course, if you use ngrok, which you very much should, it also enables you to actually connect against your Dragtio servers in production, but run your new routing code locally to see how that behaves as well, which can be very time consuming and actually also be a responsible thing to do in a context like this. And it seems I have rushed so fast through these slides that I am 2 minutes under time. I won't take questions.
Well
you
done,
can ask me those later. But anyway, that's it. And then we have 2 minutes to spend on someone else.
Top class. Thank you.
Thank you.
I may have inadvertently given people the impression it was 7 minutes. It's 5 minutes a slot. The clock is set for 5 minutes. And as Tori gets set up, since I did that very, very old UDP joke, I also feel that I can explain the true meaning of Ubuntu, which, as you probably know, is the ancient African word for I can't be bothered to configure Debian. I think you knew that, didn't you? Okay, are we up, Tori? Or have I got time for another Nan story?
No, you don't have time.
No, you're ready to go. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, Tori Searle.
Good afternoon. Today I would like to tell you about something that I found very interesting to do, and hopefully you could find interesting too. And that was trying to figure out how to make chatbot scripting chatbots fun and easy to do. So to start with, I started using a project that a friend of mine did called Jabot, which is a chatbot that's written in Java, and it was already from the outgo supporting multiple protocols. It started off with IRC and XMPP, and then later on I added Slack and Spark support. So it was already multi-protocol. And then what I added to it was a CGI scripting interface. I know you've probably heard CGI, oh, that's an ancient technology, it's terrible. But what I like about CGI is that it just allows you to script commands in any language you want. All that you need to do is be able to, 1, read environment variables, 2, read command line arguments, and 3, print the standard out. So in this case, here we read an action, which just tells you whether you're running this or whether to just query the syntax or actually running it for real. And then you can also query the from user to see it, so then you can actually include that in your response if you so desire. So here you see in the help, you print out the help syntax. Otherwise, if you run, you check to see if the right number of parameters is for the command, and you print a message either saying hello to the person or hello and printing out the command line arguments. So that is a very simple one in Perl. Likewise, as I said, you can print in any language. Here's one written in Bash. So here you see a similar thing. You can see that, okay, in help, you say that, okay, you ping it's ping an IP address, and then you check if there's one parameter, then you ping the specified parameter. Simple and easy. So then I thought, okay, wouldn't it be nice if people could just create commands on the fly directly from within the chat? So I wrote my own bespoke programming language where you can just actually write a script directly in the chat. So either A, you can do in this case where I've wrote a simple while loop and it just prints hello 10 times. But also I took it a step further. So if you want to make something that just stays around, anytime you create a function in this language, it immediately gets registered as a new bot command. So here I create a new function called pirate. It hits this web service, passing in all the parameters of the command space limited, and URL encoded it to this web API, and then prints whatever that web service prints as a result. And then the result is, when I say pirate, hello, have a great day, you get this web service turns it into pirate speak, and you have a pirate speak command. Simple, in just 5 lines of code. So next up, it's like, wouldn't it be interesting if not only that, you can actually mix up existing commands. So every existing command in it is also being used, can be treated as a function in the language. So here you have ping, which if you remember from a previous slide, was actually a command written in Bash, but here it's actually being used as a function in this command here, where I'm iterating through a list of IP addresses, pinging, and then printing out the live dead result. And so you can invoke other script commands, you can invoke CGI commands that were written in any language, or built-in Java commands. So here you see it in, but then I said, what could possibly go wrong? Like the most common thing you can have go wrong is like infinite loops. This language also protects you against infinite loops. If you try to print too much in an infinite loop, it will print an error message. If you try to print too much output, it'll truncate the output, and it does not support recursion. So in theory, and also the various nasty things that most languages have, like being able to write to disk or something like that, don't even exist in this language. So it should be reasonably safe and sandboxed for users to use. And I would love for you to prove me wrong if you want to. And if you want to try it out, you can access you can join the Slack right now by going to this bit.ly address and joining the chat room test Midori. Otherwise, you can check out the code for Java and the scripting language. The scripting language is independent of Java, so if you want to plug it into your own project, please feel free to. Thank you.
Yay. And Tori continuing the trend of bringing it in slightly early, with 4 minutes and about 12 seconds. Excellent. Okay, so David's going to be our next one. My Nan. My Nan, when she got to 70 years
You're out
old...
of time, I have no slides.
I beg your pardon?
You're out of time, I have no slides. I'm good.
You're ready to go?
Ready to go.
Oh, I'll save that Nan story for next time. Ladies and gentlemen, it's David.
All right, hello everybody. So Dan said we could talk about anything. If Randy could jam, then I could get up here and complain. So I'm here to complain. So who here develops software but more for end users like Asterisk or FreeSwitch or any kind of software that runs on a system? Good. How hard do you make it to be dummy-proof against fraud? Anybody? So that's one of the gripes that I have. I think that the open source and having everything being made easy is Pandora's box. On one hand, it gives the noobs like me to go out and be able to go play. I won't admit how many years I was running Asterisk as root until I figured out why you shouldn't. We've been getting a lot of hits lately where people are trying to do SQL injections when they do invites. And security is something I take near and dear to my heart, primarily because I get woken up middle of the night when we have all the issues, and it ends up being my responsibility to fix it. So the problem that I have in the bitching and I guess the request that I have for developers is try to train your users better. Try to make it harder for fraudsters to get in. So if you're writing software, try to see something that'll go ahead and make it very, very hard to run it as root. So if somebody is insistent on running it as root, make it really, really difficult for them to do it. Don't let, if you're developing a soft phone, don't let users put in admin, or at the very least, make it very hard for users to be using easy passwords. And I listened to David in practice this earlier, so pausing. Users are going to be as lazy as they possibly could be, and they're going to try to get away with as much as possible. So yeah, the harder you can make it for them to be stupid, the more that we can educate them, the better it's going to be, because if we don't, we're going to keep having attacks happen over and over again. We had that recently with Mongo, I think it was about a year ago, where a bunch of Mongo by default shipped that it was open, and people, I believe, were using Mongo to do DDoS attacks, where they would send in a tiny small little packet, and then it would go ahead and send back the biggest possible row, was by default without any authentication, and you had a lot of people that were starting out, didn't know what they were doing, and just to yum install or apt install, they had it running and never thought about security, and then all of a sudden there were a bunch of breaches. So in summary, if you make shit, make it secure, and make it hard for bad people to get in, and in the process, make it a pain in the ass to be stupid and educate people. And I think I'm the fastest so far.
Thank you. It was less of a complaint and more of a good advice, wasn't it, really, Duffett, in the end? Randy is our next speaker, but he expressly wishes for me to tell you about my nan. It was her 70th birthday, and she decided to celebrate by having a tattoo of a complete map of the whole of the United Kingdom done all across her back on her 70th birthday. People thought she was wild and crazy, but I used to say to them, say what you want about my nan, at least you know where you are with her. Randy, it's over to you, quickly, before the jokes get any worse.
Oh, God, okay. Well, greetings, everybody. I know, like David said once, I know probably half of you here, and I'm really pleased to be able to give this little talk, which was completely extemporaneous. Of course, this is the third talk. My first one was going to be about community and how, with answering a single forum post on CompuServe, we acquired a client that was worth probably nearly $1 million over 20 years, and we stayed with that client for 20 years. Someone posted a request on CompuServe forum. I answered it. We made an appointment. The hiring person was a woman. She was about 60. My friend and I spoke to her for a few minutes. She stood up and said, "Thank you very much for your presentation. I have several other people to see." And then she says, "Ah, the hell with it, you're hired." That happened with that single post. I've hired people on from Usenet posts that they've made over the years. As many of you know, we do a conference called the VoIP Users Conference originally. I know that at least one person has been married because of that conference, and 2 people have been hired. However, I was going to tell you about community, but inspired by Mira's talk, I wanted to tell you something about diversity. Not diversity of male and female hiring and work ethics and so on. There's plenty of work to do there. I wanted to tell you about how the only way you can get over xenophobia, racism, and sexism is to understand what it's like to be in the other person's shoes. You know the joke? If you want to know what somebody's like, you walk a mile in their shoes. Then when you've walked the mile, you also have their shoes. But to the point, there was a singer in the United States called Nat King Cole, a very famous singer, and he had his own network he had his own network television show, and he was so successful that the audience, which was probably 90% white, the women were all in love with him, and he lost that show because of that, because sponsors in the south of the country rejected that idea. Want a show of hands, have any of you ever been thrown out or refused entry to any establishment of any kind, restaurant or whatever? Has anyone here because of, well, whatever, any reason? What was the reason, Tori?
The friend I was with got into an argument with someone who was well established at the bar.
Okay, I didn't hear that, but if you did, more power to you.
He
Now
said,
I'm going to tell you about, what do we have left?
you've got 2 minutes, 20 seconds.
All right, here we go. So when I was just a kid, my brother was a jazz musician, and he brought another musician home to jam with him. This musician was African American. That'll be the only time I'll use that word. He was black. And my stepfather was a Russian immigrant, and he says, I don't want people like that in my house. And I totally didn't understand that, and I remember it today, over 50 years later. When I talk about walking in someone's shoes, what I mean is what happened to me. Lorenzo, are you here? Is Lorenzo here? Lorenzo has long hair. My hair was much longer than Lorenzo's in the 60s. I went to Disneyland. I had a girl with me. I thought, this is going to be great. We're going to rock out, and she's going to be impressed and all that. Standing in line after having paid for entry and the ride, a greasy guy comes up and says, sorry, sir, you'll have to leave. He says, because your dress code, the hair's too long. So it's already embarrassing and kind of sucked, but I said, do I get a refund? He says, no refund. Just come back when your hair's cut. So I experienced that. We had a black neighbor, and I told him about that experience, and he says, yeah, you see what that's like? I'll never forget that, and that was years and years and years ago. The final example, I lived with a black family. If you ever have seen black sitcoms, this was it. I was the white guy living with an entire family of black people, 3 generations in Seattle, Washington. We went out to get a burger. They chose to go to a black Muslim Shabazz burger. We walked in together. We were close friends. I lived with them. Behind the counter, the guy says, okay, you guys are cool, but the other guy's got to get out. The other guy was me. I have felt and experienced, first of all, I've lived with, because I'm a musician and have been for years, black people are my brothers. There's absolutely no difference between them and me, except they have better talent, better skills, and they're better looking. But besides that, the point is, this is the conclusion. The point is, I'm cut off?
Finish.
I was just going to say simply, you've got to understand what it's like, and until you have that experience, you will not understand what it's like. You can intellectualize all you want, but think about when you were ever refused service or whatever, and anything bad that's ever happened to you due to something you looked like or were missing for any reason. That's what it's all about. Thank you, David.
Thank you, Randy. Thank you. Okay, I just want to prepare other people. We've got Tim coming on, then we've got Sam Mashin, then we're going to have Jason Berryman after that. These stories are not confined to my nan. There's my granddad as well. He was very ill, and so he rubbed grease all over his back, but he went downhill really fast after that. Tim, are you ready to go? Ladies and gentlemen, Tim Panton.
So, piece of shameless self-publicist stuff here. I'm not going to talk about anything kind of deep. About listening to the future. So, this comes out of a story that I met this guy in Berlin, and we were talking, and I said to him, what do you do? And he said, I'm a modern locksmith. And I said, what the hell is a modern locksmith? And he said, well, keys are dead, right? Any key that I have a photograph of, I can 3D print. And if the photograph is geotagged, then I know where you live. Right? And I'm looking at that and thinking, whoa. And I said, well, what about these pass cards? That's fine. He said, no, I can get those. If they're radio links, I can hack them. So I said, well, what's left? And he said, well, there are keys that do cryptography and have physical connections, and those are the only keys that are going to be safe. And I suddenly realized that this guy had showed me a glimpse of the future, right? He'd showed me what it's going to look like in 5 years' time, what keys I'm going to have in my pocket, because he was a subject matter expert in a really narrow space. So I figured this would be really interesting, and whether there would be other people out there who would be able to do the same thing for me in other spaces. So Vim and I decided that it would be really fun to go out and do that, to interview people for a podcast who are subject matter experts on a narrow thing from whom we don't normally hear. So that's what we do, and we specialize in interviewing people who are on the boundary of tech and society and what hopefully they can tell us about the future. And the name comes from a quote from William Gibson, who says that the future is out there, it's just not evenly distributed yet. So there's a little bit of VoIP, which is that I wanted to interview people and I wanted them to be comfortable with it, right? I wanted it to be really easy. And it turns out that I couldn't find a podcast interviewing tool that was any good. So I ended up writing one. That's kind of what happens to people like me. And it turns out that WebRTC actually works on 100% of cell phones. Every single one of you has a cell phone where WebRTC works in the browser. And the microphones are great. So we use that, and it works pretty well. Sample of some of the people we've interviewed. Brian Capuch, who I think quite a few of you maybe who have already met, who talked about how to build a community network where the DSL was rubbish. So he built a community network based on old routers, repurposed routers, stuck onto the top of grain silos. And then kind of total contrast, but still about community, Emma Bierman was talking about how to make playful communities, how to make people enjoy their lives more. And she's got this wonderful turn of phrase, and she called IoT devices enchanted objects, because they have behaviors that are magical, which I thought was wonderful. And then more seriously, Annie Curry, she talked about data centers, the fact that data centers are doubling power consumption every 18 months. We have Moore's law for power consumption in data centers, and we have to stop that. That has to stop. And she was talking about how that might happen and how that might work. And as a contrast, we talked to Batea, and she was talking about how hydrogen can be a renewable energy source and how that works. And then we talked to Gurney about bias in AIs and how that can be documented and how policy is happening in politics to try and manage that. And then just last week, I did an interview with Shaf Chowdhury, who's done a test on social media for measuring, crowdsourced test for measuring the behavior of films and how they represent Muslims. And then we had some off-the-wall ones. I had John Kershaw, who runs a dating agency, which is for people with beards and people who love people with beards. And it was all about modern dating and how that behaves and how social media affects it. And then Dan Lane, who I think some of you also know, was talking about future of transport and with his personal experience of jetpacks. And he has actually flown a jetpack. So I encourage you to subscribe to the URL. There's 20 other topics already. We do one every couple of weeks. If you've got a topic, come and find me. Come and tell me about the thing that you think we should be hearing about. In the queue, we've got open source tech for pancreas, so diabetic management, which can be better than the official stuff. And we've got somebody talking about how communities can use technology to do disaster management, kind of self-service communities. And if you want to subscribe, you just say, play Distributed Future Podcast to your voice assistant, Alexa or whatever, or you can scan the QR. And it's not always me talking, it's not always the interviewee. Vim is also on there a lot, and she's actually a better interviewer than I am. Anyway, that's me.
Hey. Thank you, Tim. Very professional, in on time. We've got Sam Machin coming up next. Then we've got Jason Berryman. Then we've got Dave Horton. So, Dave, if you can make your way around, that'd be good. My nan, eventually she died, and we decided to have an open casket funeral. And the undertaker wanted a picture of her so he could kind of make her up to look like she looked like in real life, you know. Sadly, the only photo we had was from a theme park when she's on a roller coaster, you know, those ones. So everybody's walking past the open casket and she's like that. But anyway, more about Nan later. Right now, it's Sam Machin.
Thank you. So, I'm doing this conference the long way around. My talk earlier was all about the stuff I've been hacking in my spare time, and now I'm going to talk about my day job. Has anybody heard of Node-RED? Oh dear, a few of you. Okay, cool. This is the thing that I'm obsessed with right now. Node-RED is a flow-based programming for the Internet of Things. This is the nodered.org website. I think that term doesn't do it justice. When we say Internet of Things, people think sensors and rain monitors and stuff, but actually lots and lots of things, especially comms. I think it's really nice for comms, because really these days a phone is just a thing connected to the Internet. So, quick demo. What we have is, this is the Node-RED editor. This is an instance. It all runs inside a browser. This is an instance running on the cloud somewhere. You can run it on your own machine. You can run it on a Raspberry Pi. This one's running locally. You can do it anywhere. And you have a canvas, and then you have a palette down the side here of all the nodes. So we can say we want to do a really simple HTTP server. I just want to put one in here that's, we create an endpoint /foo. And we just return a response there and deploy that. And boom, we've got a web endpoint, which I can go to demo.node-red, the host /foo, and it'll just return nothing at the moment because I'm just returning an empty response. But that's how easy it is to throw up a webhook or something. So there's a whole bunch of built-in basic nodes for doing stuff. You've got HTTP, MQTT, because it's It's quite IoT-ish. You've got some logic and stuff down here. But the thing I've been working on is, as you might know, I work for Nexmo or Vonage, and we have a set of nodes now for our API. So we can build any call control, programmatic, call handling, routing type voice SMS stuff inside Node-RED. This is my code now for my voice application. So what we've got is our incoming calls. So we send a webhook, hits an answer, and then I'm going to use a talk node where I'll say, welcome to ComCon, please press 1 for music, 2 to join the party, collect the input from the user, so that's like a DTMF input command. These are all the Nexmo API, you could read the docs if you wanted to see that, and return that, and at the same time I'm also going to send you an SMS. So if you call one of those 2 numbers, US or UK numbers, and press 1 or 2, your event will then hopefully come through on here, and depending on which option you choose, you'll then get either some music or a conference. Fingers crossed. Almost dangerous demos. There we go, we've got some, so you can see in the debug, all the events for all the calls are coming in, and that's people hitting it. So you get the debug on the console, and this is all running, and I can make changes to the application just inside a web browser. You can sit and hack away on an iPad or anything like that. So hopefully if you choose option 2, it'll make a conversation, as we call it, or a conference, which should put everybody in a conference call. And you should also get an SMS at some point when it answers. Unless Cesare's media bridge falls over. He looks at it, it should be fine. Sorry? No. You're in the conference, so can you hear each other in the conference? Cool. So, you know, that's quite cool. So really, we've got all our functionality in here, but what's really, really interesting to me in this is that there's a library out there. It's an open source project, so it's JS Foundation, started off life inside IBM, but you have this thing called the palette, which is all the nodes, and you can see some of the packages I've got installed here, but there's a whole world of other third-party packages. So let's say, hey, I want something to do Slack. I could say, yep, there's a Slack package, bang, give me the Slack package. I won't install it now because NPM takes forever. And I have some Slack nodes, and I just want to hook up something for an SMS into Slack, or something to control my house, or anything like that. So I think it's really interesting, it's really exciting, and partly because it's an open platform and an open ecosystem that everybody can create their nodes for, we can kind of cross-connect stuff, which is when stuff gets far more interesting than just sitting in silos. And 53 seconds.
Well done, that man. Thank you very much. Top class. Okay, our next man up is Jason Berryman. And just thinking about funerals, it reminded me of an uncle of mine who had been a merchant navyman, been at sea a lot of his life. And when he died, there was a bit of a family argument because we wanted him buried at sea, but his wife wanted him cremated. And there's a bit of an argument, buried at sea or cremated. So in the end, we had a bit of a family get-together, and we compromised and had the bloke poached. It was a very short service, actually. Some people took flowers. I took toast and jam. Anyway, are we ready to go, Jason?
We are.
Over
yes.
to you, sir.
Right. Hi, everyone. I'm Jason. This is me. I've got no time to tell you about this. So what I'm doing is I'm squeezing probably about 40 minutes of content down into 5. A little bit about microservices via sort of building huge code blocks. So first of all, quick look at a monolith. You've got large amounts of code, very easy to break, very difficult to test, hard to deploy, and if you need to roll something back, that can be even harder. Microservices, small pieces of code, nice, easy to test components. Really easy to deploy, and you can deploy individual parts of this, not just your whole application. Yeah. So I built a translation app. I was part of the one of the launch partners for Google Cloud Text-to-Speech, and I built this translation app. You put some text in, and it translated it into a different language, turned it into text-to-speech, saved it as a file. And here it is, and you can read through that at your leisure. Then I turned it into a microservice. So here I've got one section that transcribes the audio, another section that translates the text, another little bit that creates the speech, and another piece that saves the file. And these separate things are all triggered by different actions in the database. So quick demo. How am I doing for time?
It's down there on the clock.
Oh, it's down there on the clock. I've got 3 minutes 34. Marvellous. So we built this fantastic web thing to show the translation app, and I've totally not got this working whatsoever. So I'm going to show you the raw database, because actually that's probably more interesting. So here I've got hello everyone, welcome to ComCon 2019 in Japanese. We can pick a different language, French, German, Danish. We've got some Danes in the room. Let's set that to Danish, and we'll delete that version.
We said something that you didn't know the code for.
I've got quite a few of the codes in my head. There we go. So now we've got the code there in Danish. And is that correct? Yeah, brilliant, good. I can remember a bit of Danish from when I used to live there. Right, and now if I hit the speak button, it will now do a translate into, and what you see up here is a base 64 encoded string, and so that has been written into the database. And that then triggers another function, another microservice, that is going to write this into, oh, here you are, Dan. Answer to your question, I can look it up.
Okay.
If I had time. So here, if I just refresh this page, is my translated text, and hopefully there'll be audio from my laptop.
Hej alle og velkommen til ComCon 2019.
Oh, it's not coming out of the...
You need to plug it in.
Where?
Audio.
Where's the audio?
Hold on.
Stop the clock.
Dangly. No, no.
Start the car.
There you go.
Hej alle og velkommen til ComCon 2019.
Right, there we go. And that's it. It's all finished. I've still got 1 minute 30 to go.
Hey. Well done, Jason. Okay, just to give you an opportunity to start assembling. There we've got Peter, who's coming up after Dave Horton. Then we've got Jim Van Muggelen. Where's that, Jim? Jim, if you could begin to assemble in that direction, that'd be great. And after Jim, we've got Daniel Pocock. It looks like you're ready to go, so I don't have to do a joke.
Yeah, sure. I'm Dave, the Dractio guy. I wanted to talk a little bit about business models, a little bit about altruism, but mainly want to see if you will shift your perspective a little bit with me and sort of go beyond business models in a way that I'll talk about in a second. But, you know, let's start with this. How would you describe all the people in this room, or this group of people? I think in that list, pretty quickly, you'd say we're problem solvers. This is a group of problem solvers. We love to solve problems. We all think we're good at solving problems. And so why then, 20 years into this open source RTC revolution, are we still talking about business models and have not solved the business model problem and really haven't made any progress? I actually think that's kind of an interesting thing for a group of us that are really into problem solving. I put it down to two things. One is we've been looking for point solutions. The other, we've been using a set of tools to dissect the problem that are not the only tools we have available to us. So in terms of point solutions, when I talk about a business model, what I'm really talking about is how do I make money? I'm talking about me, right? When you talk about business models, same thing. We're not really talking about a general purpose solution. I got so exhausted recently, mentally exhausted, thinking through business models that I gave myself a break. I said, Dave, just forget about that. Why don't you just think about something that's highly correlated to that, which is the health of this ecosystem that you're working in. By ecosystem, I mean the open source RTC community. Because if that ecosystem's healthy, there's a good chance you'll thrive. If it's not healthy, you're going to have problems. So that's kind of the perspective shift I want you to sort of come on me with and just think about the health of the ecosystem and let business models sort of go for the minute. The second reason I think that we've been unsuccessful is that we're using one set of tools, which is economic tools, to solve the problem as if it was purely an economic problem, and that's fine, but there are other tools we can use. But before we leave business models, what do economists classically have to say on this? In the long and short of it is nothing particularly helpful to us. The tragedy of the commons is a classic economic problem that's been studied forever. You know, the scenario of a town that has a common area where all the cows can graze, and economists conclude that unless it's regulated, unless the hand of the market is there, it'll get overgrazed, it will be destroyed. None of that's particularly useful for us, but something very interesting happened in 2009, which is somebody won the Nobel Prize for Economics that almost nobody in the field of economics knew of. Can you imagine that? You win the Nobel Prize in your field, and most people in the field don't know you. And it was this woman, Eleanor Ostrom, who took a second look at this and said, guys, you know, no offense to your theory, but that's wrong. There are communities out there that are effectively self-regulating. And more to the point, she identified common behaviors that they all had. I'm not going to go through them, but if you run an open source community, open source project, you ought to take a look at these behaviors. all communities that are successful as self-regulating sort of line up with these behaviors. Some of them are quite interesting. Let me just point out one. Graduated sanctions for misbehaviors. That means a soft touch to start with when transgressions happen, and graduated after that. It was interesting. I think Daniel on Monday mentioned, what about these open source projects that sort of flame out at you? Well, this says those projects won't be successful. So it's interesting to kind of look at that, apply it to your project, or apply it to our ecosystem as a whole. I want to talk about something else. Altruism. In a sense, our ecosystem, our project, is based on a few thin poles of altruistic behavior from a certain number of projects and people that could be withdrawn at any point in time. Given that, I think we ought to know everything science has to say about altruism. It turns out evolutionary biologists, in particular, I'd recommend reading this guy, David Sloan Wilson, very, very interesting. Altruism is not something we can count on. There are certain conditions that have to exist for it to happen. For example, you're standing on the subway in the London Underground at rush hour. What's the winning strategy, selfish or altruistic? Clearly, selfish. You're going to get on that subway. Not one of you is going to take the altruistic approach and sit there through 1, 2, 3 subway trains. The conditions just aren't there. On the other hand, let's say you're in a war zone with a small combat group. Will you expect to see selfish or altruistic behavior out of that group? Generally, you'll see altruistic behavior because there's conditions that he points to that engender that. It's interesting to understand the conditions that generate altruism since we kind of depend on it so much. Just to kind of wrap up, what would it look like, in our ecosystem writ large if those those behaviors were really evident? So I took a shot at what would our agreed upon behaviors be? I think rule number 1, don't damage the ecosystem, right? Simple. Rule number 2, you're always either damaging the ecosystem or making it better. There's no such thing as wandering in, grabbing something, coming out without having an impact. I think that's important to remember. For creators of open source, don't make it all about you. This is hard for me I really had to train myself on this. We're all the hero of our own story, right? But that's really not the case. I might have created something, but someone else bet their business to come along and really breathe life into it. Both are needed. We cannot control, we can't have normative behavior governing both unless both are involved. I think I'm done, so I will just say, one last point. I would say for consumers of open source, think asymmetrically about ways to return value. This is not a transactional thing. If someone uses my software, I'm happy for them to pivot and then say, I'm going to give something back to the community by sponsoring ComCon or something like that. It's not transactional. It doesn't have to be cost anything. It doesn't have to be high cost or, there are low cost ways to sustain the ecosystem. So, thank you.
Thank you, Dave Horton. Next, we have a Sipgate friend. It's Peter that's going to plug in next. Anybody use eBay to sell things here at all? Few people. I recently sold my Hoover on eBay. Well, after all, it was only gathering dust. Yeah. Hey. You like that one, didn't you? You like that one. Okay, Peter, it's over to you.
I'm ready to go. Hi, I'm Peter from Sipgate. I'm going to tell you how to become a better software engineer by doing nothing. So first of all, I want to start with a question. Who knows pair programming or mob programming? Raise your hand. All right, that's sort of half. So for the last around about 2 years, I've been working on Clink, which is essentially a browser-based SIP phone with team capabilities. And while doing so, we've used several programming techniques, one of which is headphone programming, as I like to call it. And it's the art of doing everything yourself, your way, only your way. You build it, you run it, and you get called in the middle of the night if it breaks, which is awesome. It looks something like this. And it's great, because you're your own boss, and you can really get in the zone and get things done. And it worked for the software industry for many years. But at Sipgate, we needed more. And in 2010, we introduced Lean, Agile, Scrum, and Kanban in our development cycle. So Scrum, basically, in a nutshell, is this. For those of you who don't know it, it crunches down development time from years to months or weeks, in our case, and it changes a lot. Foremost, the prioritizing of workload. And another one is it gives you ritualized feedback. So within with the customer or within the team itself. And last but not least, it changes how you collaborate within the company, which leads me to pair programming. It's a technique where two programmers work together on one workstation. One is the driver who writes the code, and the other one, the navigator, reviews each line of the code as it's typed in. Some of you may know it as extreme programming. I don't think it's that extreme. It's pretty normal for me. and it's also pretty great. So here you see two people working, one of which is a software developer and one is a user experience designer, and they transfer knowledge during work. It's great. You learn and you work, and it's great. You have greater quality for your code, for the product you're working on. You get instant feedback for what you're doing. And on the downside, you have less procrastination, which I think is also okay, because who really needs to read Facebook? And another problem might be the people that you have to work with, because it can be difficult at some point. At Zipgate, we said, this isn't enough. We need to do more. So we tried mob programming, which is a software development approach where the whole team works on the same thing at the same time, in the same space, at the same computer or whiteboard or whatever. And it looked like this in 2013. So we just used a projector through the code on the wall. You couldn't read anything, but we managed to get it done. And last week, it looked like this. Doesn't really look any different, except we use TVs now with better contrast. But still, it's awesome, because you have all the knowledge in one place. Every specialist you need from the company, like SIP or web or backend or whatever, you just bring them all together, bring it all in one room. And especially for Greenfield projects, it's awesome, because everyone is on board with every decision you make. And you learn together, everyone learns from each other, and the most important thing, the mob keeps rolling. So if you have a problem, someone will be able to solve it, or be able to Google it while you think about it. On the downside, it can be difficult for newbies, as usually you have like 5 professionals sitting in front of a screen screaming at each other which database to use, and newbies usually don't even know what a database is, well, for example. You might think, I want to start now, right now, and I say, yes, do it, but start small. So just look at the screen of your partner, of your colleague, and think together. That's a start. That's hard enough to do if you're in the same workplace, because everyone has their own ideas. And if you're comfortable with this, scale it up to 3 people. And at some point you will notice, damn, my deck hurts. I always have to look to the right. So get a TV, get more people in the room, work on your setup. That's the most important thing when doing mob programming. And the other very valuable thing is work interdisciplinary. So here you can see we have developers, user experience designers, and customer support. So you're actually doing what the customer wants, which is always good. And now to the nothing part. As you can see, you can just lay around in a beanbag and look at the code while someone else is typing. And if you want to do a little bit, you can write stickies so the boss knows that you're doing something. And if you really want to scale it up, look at this video from Hunter Industries. You can find it on YouTube, A Day of Mob Programming 2016. They put mob programming on steroids and bought like 3 75-inch screens, put them all together, put someone at the keyboard in front of these, and they work together. And I talked to one of the lead developers, and he said it's awesome. They write awesome code, and yeah, if you have worked with these techniques, I would be glad to talk to you over a beer at the bar, or over Clink, which I love and I love to build. And I think that's it. Thank you.
Hey, thank you, Peter. Bang on time as well.
Nice.
Bang on time. Well done, that man. Okay, let's just look at our list and see who we've got coming up. We've got Jim Van Muggelen next, but let me tell the other people who need to become assembled. After Jim, we've got Daniel Pocock. After Daniel, we've got Rob Pickering, and then Lorenzo at the back of the room. And then finally, our friend James Bodie. Thieves broke into my house the other night looking for money, so I got out of bed and started looking with them. No joy. Are we ready to go, Jim?
Oh, not quite. Almost.
Okay. I can't do more than one joke per thing, otherwise I'll run out. So, okay, it looks like we are ready.
Yeah, that looks good. Okay. I've never asked this question before. How many of you have benefited from the O'Reilly Asterisk book over the last 15 years? Cool. I was at AstriCon, Asterisk DevCon a couple of years ago, and there was a lot of frustration in the room because the Asterisk book hadn't been updated for some time, and it was woefully out of date. Life and Russell had moved on. They weren't working with Asterisk anymore, so I stood up and made the commitment to update the book. Some of the challenges that I was looking to tackle was I needed to massively downsize it. It was over 800 pages, and O'Reilly said we need a smaller book here. I wanted to incorporate current best practices. I needed to get ARI and WebRTC in there. And I wanted to address security because that's just something that should always be involved. And rather than telling people just disable SE Linux, I wanted to make Asterisk work with SE Linux running as non-root. So I worked through all of last year and part of this year on that. It went to production in May, expected release date of August. As I was packing for this trip, I got an email from an O'Reilly bot. Congratulations, your book is now available on Amazon. So as of Friday, the 5th of July, the 5th edition of the Asterisk book is available. Thank you. It's been released under a Creative Commons license. However, I was caught by surprise by the release date, and we haven't updated asteriskdocs.org yet. So apologies for that. I'll get that done as soon as I get back. The whole process, I think the most joyful part of it was the support that I received from people actually in this room. Dan helped me out with the technical review, and David wrote the internationalization chapter. And Matt Fredrickson, who was here earlier today, and also Matt Jordan from Digium, just were so generous with their time. This couldn't have happened without that. So that's been really joyful. So that's it.
Hey. Thank you. And is it Daniel next? Is it? Let me have a look at my list. It is Daniel next, and then it's Rob Pickering after him, and Lorenzo after him. And since Daniel doesn't appear to have anything to plug in, I believe I can hand straight to you, sir.
Yes.
Okay.
So, after my talk before, I've downgraded my technology platform. Mira gave us a great talk this morning about a very important topic, diversity. So I thought I'd follow up with some stories about my own experiences with diversity in Debian. Dan gave the example before that some of us in this room are privileged white males, and we can't always have the same experiences that other people have. But that shouldn't prevent us from going out to learn about the issue. Certainly I've spent much of my life living in countries where English is not the dominant language. So that does give me an appreciation of some of the challenges that other minorities face. But on the other hand, being a privileged white male living in Switzerland is not a major disadvantage. So in Debian, I've been mentoring in the Google Summer of Code and the Outreachy program, and Outreachy in particular attracts many different people who have struggled to get into IT through other programs, or they've simply been afraid to apply. And so Outreachy is their first contact with the free software community. This is a great opportunity not just for the applicant, but for the mentor to learn. Most of the women and people from other disadvantaged groups who apply don't need somebody to come along and teach them. They just need some help to get obstacles out of the way. They're very, very capable people. Sometimes it's really interesting to learn from their stories. So one of the highlights about Mira's talk were the stories and examples she gave. Does anyone remember what Mira likes to eat? She didn't want the food in the women's tent. Hamburgers, yes. So stories are great like that. They help make the issue personal. They help us remember what the issues are and think about it. So many of the people I've mentored have told me personal stories, and they've put a lot of confidence in me doing that. And that's a great way for all of us to learn about what the problem really is in diversity. 2 years ago, I went to KOTOR for Digital Born Media Carnival. was a mixture of people from different backgrounds, human rights lawyers, journalists, activists, and some technologists with an interest in privacy and digital rights. And a couple of days went by without me meeting any other developers. And I was standing in the queue for lunch and started talking to a young woman next to me. And this was actually my first meeting with a developer, and she told me she had participated in the NASA Space Apps Challenge and been a global finalist. So I changed my schedule, and after leaving that conference, I went over to Kosovo to meet more of her friends. A couple of months later, I went back and they organised a hackathon for women. It was a huge success. One of the best things about that event is that at the end of the hackathon, they did what we're doing now. Each group got up to talk for a few minutes about what they had done. And this was so exciting that I thought this is a good lead into the next thing that we could do together. So I went back there at the beginning of this year and helped them start a Toastmasters group. So this has given them a tool that they're building themselves, that they can improve their skills so that when they come into our events, they're not just going to sit at the back, they're going to come and fight us off the stage, which is great news. Diversity is for everyone, though. It's not just for somebody who volunteers to be part of one of those teams that does mentoring. It's for everyone in the organisation, everyone in the event. There are little things that we can all do all the time, even outside of these talks. So one suggestion I'd like to leave you with as I finish is to go out and look for an event that you've never been to before, which will give you opportunities to meet different people, to awaken your knowledge of different cultures. So maybe an event in a different part of the world. And I'm not simply talking about Australia, because the culture there is rather similar to here. But look for somewhere that you haven't been before, maybe with a type of community that isn't quite the same as what we have here at our events in places like the UK and Western Europe. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much, Daniel. Thank you. We've got Rob Pickering next, and then Lorenzo is up, and then it will be James Bodie. I'm not feeling as good as I usually would because I recently got kicked out of the Arnold Schwarzenegger Impression Society, impersonating Arnold Schwarzenegger. They said my impressions of him were terrible. I said, yeah, don't worry, I'll return.
So this talk is probably going to be the shortest one at an event because it's mostly what he just said. It was really good to hear Mira's presentation this morning. It's quite interesting that it's spurred so many contributions. One thing for me, towards the end of the Q&As, a couple of people asked quite similar questions. I think it was Varun and Laura sort of essentially said something that I can paraphrase as, what can I personally do to make my hiring more diverse in my own company? And there's kind of a train of thought there, which is we've done all the things to be mindful. We think we're a great place to work. We think that we're checking our biases. So how come we're still full of white blokes? Why are we not finding people out there to hire? And my short answer to that question is that mostly that we've put people from other backgrounds off coming into this industry, and we need to do stuff to fix that. And the possible short answer, and a short, very quick answer, is that there are almost certainly organisations and spaces out there now, probably in the locality that you're in, that would love your help. And it's how you go out and find them, and in making connections to those folks, you will probably help your own organisations greatly. And I don't want to be preachy about this, but I just wanted to kind of share a couple of things that I did in a previous company that sort of helped. And that I think may have had some impact, and the kind of templates that you can kind of follow. So one of them is an organisation called Girls Code MK. And I'm just going to play a really short video and eat into my 5 minutes that way. Hopefully the sound will work. Awesome.
Students as young as 10 years old, teenagers, women in their 20s and 30s that are maybe changing their careers or looking for their first career. A couple of years ago, I was a woman that was looking to transition to change change her career. I found a couple of meetups and I went there, but the meetups weren't particularly beginner friendly, and also they were really male dominated. Because I didn't find any meetup like that, I decided, along with my wife, to start organizing these meetups. I'm in the process of trying to change my career, so I started from the basics, and I found I quite enjoy putting things together, making something appear on the screen. I think groups like Girls Code are invaluable because the industry, it's well known, wants to recruit more female coders, developers, engineers, and you have to start at grassroots level. You have to have these groups that give people confidence because it is intimidating, and you need people like here in your local community that can encourage you into and ease you in gently.
So Girls Code MK were one group, and we actually came across them because one company that I work with provides networking on a site, and someone had donated them a meeting room for a Django Girls event, and they sort of said, oh, can we get some access to the Wi-Fi? And we sort of said, well, yeah, that's great. What else do you need? And they sort of said, well, actually, you know, if someone could sponsor the food, it'll cost about £200, or we'll go to Costco. And, you know, these aren't expensive things to get involved in. And then we got folks from the company involved in coaching. When I was talking about this earlier to Mira, you know, this kind of crosses over the point that she made about these specialist, you know, girls groups or whatever identity that you're looking at, that you can kind of, by creating that separation, that can be a bad thing, and you end up with a jug of carrots or something like that. But I think the point is that you've got to create these spaces sometimes that give people confidence. Another organisation that serendipitously we've worked with, founders and coders, happened to go to a meetup I don't normally go to. Met a guy there, fantastic social entrepreneur who founded that space. They provide a free at the point of access JavaScript bootcamp for aspiring developers, and they try and get a 50-50 gender balance, try and encourage people from non-traditional backgrounds into there. We worked with them, did a WebRTC module in their course for 2 or 3 days where we took over the space, put senior dev in there to do that, and okay, there's a bit of cost to doing that. And then went and did a TAD hack with that group of people, who then produced a prototype hack for youth mental health services. I think the point really is that there's some long game stuff that you can do working in schools and education, and just by being a human being with all the people around you, to tell the next generation how exciting, relevant and accessible our industry is. But there's also some now stuff, and the way that you kind of access that is by going to meetups for aspiring coders. So, you know, it's great going to the advanced SIP and VoIP work group where we tend to mix with ourselves, but the number of really smart people in this industry and the amount of economic impact we've got actually going to those meetups with junior devs and going and contributing, you will make these connections, and in doing that in your community, that will create a hiring platform if you if you want to be, you know, kind of that short loop about it. Find those social entrepreneurs which exist probably in your own environment and support them. Anyone here from Birmingham in the UK? Fantastic. There's a Girls Code group in Birmingham in the UK. They're short of coaches right now, so they're running an event on the 20th. There are a group of people going from another group to go and coach them. But, you know, literally, if you can find some coders who know Python that want to go and do a Django Girls workshop with them, and these kind of groups probably exist in all our communities and industry. If we put ourselves behind that, we'll fix the diversity problem.
Well done, Matt, Rob. Thank you. Thank you very much, Rob. Down to our last two now. Lorenzo's just going to get us set up. And as you perhaps know, I've been trying to help Dan out across the conference, but it's not all been easy, because yesterday a very large roll of bubble wrap arrived, you know, a really big roll of bubble wrap. And I said to Dan, what shall I do with it? He said, oh, just pop it in the corner. 3.5 hours I was there. 3.5 hours for that. Are you on, Lorenzo? Yeah, that was a terrible joke. Well, yeah, fair enough. Would you like a little bit of audio?
Yeah.
Okay. This one's got audio, gents.
Let me just check that it works. No, sorry. Okay, it works. So yeah, I mean, all the talks that we've seen so far have been either very useful or very profound, and I can anticipate that my talk will be neither of them. So because I'm here to talk about music because I love music, I love listening to music, I love talking about music, I love exchanging ideas, and I love writing music as well as a hobby. Of course, I'm not any good at that because otherwise I'd be hanging out with Katy Perry by now. But it's a fun hobby that I'm dangling with. That I found out that actually with Linux there are a lot of fun programs that you can experiment with to do fun things like tools to actually generate drum patterns, multi-track tools, and so on. But I wanted to focus on one tool in particular because it's, let's say, the geekiest one of them all, because it's basically, Lillipond is basically a LaTeX kind of format to write music sheets and music and MIDI files. So it's really cool. You basically code and eventually music comes out of it. And there is actually a cool UI that you can use that is called Frescobaldi to play with it, just to show an example of something that I did at the latest Camaillio World. At the latest Camaillio World demo, let me see where it is. I did a very simple demo where I basically took the very happy birthday song and I used Lillipond to basically change the key to a minor key, change all the notes to a minor key to turn it into a very sad happy birthday song instead, which was interesting, let's say. Well, I mean, it's a really interesting tool. As you can see, basically you have ways to select how it should look on paper. For instance, in this case, I wanted something that was vertical and tighter because it had to show up on video. But as you can see, I'm writing code here. There are no notes. The notes are beautifully rendered and generated, but this is all code. I'm defining the instruments. It's really nice. And just to show you something that I've been playing with, I was out there in the couch the last hour just to play with something and to show how easy it can really be. Let's see if it works. I wrote this whole, I called it the ComCon Concerto with the special dedication to Dan Jenkins, of course. But it's not really a ComCon Concerto. You should probably recognize the tool soon, but the theme soon. But I just use 4 instruments like a fake string quartet and let's see if it's any good or not. Yeah, you should recognize the tool, no? Are we going to get in trouble because we're not authorized to play this music? Okay, I'm not paying any of them. But anyway, as you can see, it's very simple. I mean, I just wrote, this is just code. I mean, I'm just writing code to write all the notes. There is a relative mode that basically says, just write nodes relative to this pitch rather than another, so it's really easy. You can write functions. If you have instruments that all play the same thing, you can write a function with the notes, and then you call the function from the instrument. So really a programming language, really LaTeX-like, so really cool. So that's basically it. I don't have anything else to add. If not, if you are interested in music and experimenting with it, give this tool a try because you'll have fun with that. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Lorenzo. Brilliant stuff. And the last speaker or quick-fire person is going to be James Bodie. I thought I'd just tell you a couple of things that happened between me and my ex-wife, sadly. The first thing was that I swapped our double bed for a trampoline without telling her. She hit the roof. And then I got rid of that and I bought a water bed, and it was after that we drifted apart, really. Okay. I'm sorry. I know they are pretty awful jokes. James, are we on? No, we're not. Oh, okay. All right. Well, just going back to funerals then. As we were earlier. Have you ever noticed, in some countries, you know, we tend to have pretty dire funerals here in England, but some countries, you know, it's a big cathartic experience. They set things on fire and everybody wails, but, you know, it's very cathartic. Got to thinking about it for here in England. I thought probably the reason we don't do it here is we don't really have the weather for it, do we? You know, you've put your nan on the funeral pyre, and then what happens is there's a light drizzle or maybe a heavy dew, and you just can't set her on fire, can you? You know, you're there trying some matches on her hair, you know. Audio. Or, you know, siphoning fuel out of the hearse in order to... Anyway, that's another story. I think we're probably ready, aren't we, Joe? Well, I really hope we're ready.
Yeah, funny thing happened to me when I arrived, you know. I bumped into Randy, and he was lost. He said, I can't find my hotel room. And I said, where's that? Room 404. And then he said, how's your room? And I said, it's okay, because I'm in room 200. So, you know another one? Not found. Yeah, definitely not found. We'll get there
Actually,
in a moment.
I've been getting on very well with the lady on reception. She gave me her number. It's 0. Tried it from another place. She sounded totally different. Totally different.
Yeah, we're good to go.
Are you ready?
So, when I did my little spiel earlier, am I on? Yes. You press the button, going. I didn't have time to do a practical demo, and I didn't know whether it was going to work, and I don't know whether this is going to work, actually, because it is working. That's good. So I have, what am I going to talk about? Yeah, this is called 2G or not 2G. That is the question. Those of you who've got a local phone on EE, you'll find that you've got really good reception, because the reason for that is that there's a flagpole 50 meters that way, which looks like that, and it's not actually a flagpole, it's a mast. But anybody who's not on EE probably had no signal. So can I ask you now to just get your phones and have a look? All right, listen, I've heard this so many times. I do not hijack anything. All I do is I provide service where there was previously no service. So just a show of hands, how many people in here have actually got service with Chalk Mobile now? Well, there's a few. Yeah, it's kind of working then, isn't it? Yeah. So let me tell you about the radio that's providing this service. It's this little 3D printed case down below here. It's got a software-defined radio in there with an FPGA in it doing the signal processing. This is a pre-production model. Production ones will come, very poppy. Production ones will come with a metal alloy case with fins on. This one's got a slightly noisy little fan on there because it does generate a little bit of heat. Power output of this is 2 times 250 milliwatts, enough to give a range of about 500 meters from a chimney into a house, or about 1.2 kilometers if you're just walking down the street, or if you've got a directional antenna on the side of a house a little bit further away, probably about 3 or 4 kilometers. What else can I tell you about it? You can give it a go if you want. You should be, if you're not on O2, you'll be operating on what we call guest mode, which is the ability to make an outbound call, but we're not doing a location update so that you get all your traffic back to your phone. That's done deliberately because we don't want to upset any mobile network operators, because that's kind of bad. But however, if you're on O2, you should have full roaming because we've negotiated with them and they're okay with it. So, and the service is free. That's that. Everybody take a deep breath. And before anybody complains about this, I did ask David's permission, okay? This is a silly little video. Yesterday we did this challenge thing. We had the... oh my God. Here we go. And this is our team, of which David was a key member. And this is so funny, I just thought I'd share it with you. This is David with his hair. And I love Chris as well. It's some... No!
Where's that code of conduct?
Yeah. Is that the most politically incorrect video you've seen at ComCom ever? Look, well done, David. Where are you, David? Is he run away?
He's hiding now.
Oh, there he is. Yeah. I never knew you had it in you, David. Brilliant. Look at that. Anyway, enough of that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, James. Thank you. The multi-talented Mr. James Bodie. Reminds me, we were having a conversation in the bar last night about talented pets, and I was telling them about a goldfish I had that could break dance, only for about 20 seconds. And anyway, that was the end of that. Right. Now, we're just going to have a 5-minute, almost a 3-minute, really, leg stretch break very quickly, and then we're going to come back in the room for Dan's closing remarks. Is that correct? Okay, so do not leave the venue. If you need to use the loo, use the loo. Maybe get a coffee or whatever. Just a 5-minute leg stretch and then all back in the room for Dan's closing remarks. Thank you very much.